Chapter 1. The Young Man Next Door. My story begins with an incident that is bound to happen sometime in any household that boasts, or perhaps deplores, a high-spirited girl of 23 in it. It begins with a row about a young man. My story begins too where the first woman's story began, in a garden. It was the back garden of our red-roofed villa in that suburban street, Laburnum Grove, Putney, SW. Now all those 85 neat gardens up and down the leafy road are one exactly like the other, with the same green strip of lawn, just not big enough for tennis. The same side borders gay with golden calceolaria, scarlet geranium, blue lobelia, and all the bright, easy-to-grow London flowers. All the villas belonging to the gardens seem alike too, with their green front doors, their white steps, their brightly polished door knockers, and their well-kept curtains. From the look of these typically English, cheerful, middle-class, not too well-off little homes, you'd know just the sort of people who live in them. The plump housekeeping mother, the season-ticket father, the tennis-playing sons, the girls in dainty blouses who put their little newly whitened shoes to dry on the bathroom windowsill, and who call laughing remarks to each other out of the window. "I say, Gladys, don't forget it's the theatre tonight." "Oh, rather not. See you up at the tennis club presently?" "No, I'm meeting Vera to shop and have lunch in Oxford Street." "Dissipated rakes. We don't have much money, but we do see life, eh?" "Yes. From what I see of them, they do get heaps of fun out of their lives. These young people who make up such a large slice of the population of our great London. There's laughter and good fellowship and enjoyment going on all up and down our road. Except here. No laughter and parties and tennis club appointments at number 45, where I, Beatrice Lovelace, live with my Aunt Anastasia. No gay times here. When we came here 6 years ago, I was 18. Aunt Anastasia was rigidly firm about our having absolutely nothing to do with the people of the neighbourhood. "They are not our kind," she said, with her stately, rather thin, grey-haired head in the air. "And though we may have come down in the world, we are still Lovelaces, as we were in the old days when your dear grandfather had Lovelace Court. Even if we do seem to have dropped out of our world, we need not associate with any other. Better know society than the wrong society. So, since our world takes no further notice of us, we have no society at all. I can't tell you how frightfully, increasingly, indescribably dull and lonely it all is. I simply long for somebody fresh of my own age to talk to, and I see so many of them about here. It's like starving in the midst of plenty," I said to myself this evening as I was watering the pinks in the side borders. The girls at number 46 to the right of our garden were shrieking with laughter together on their lawn over some family joke or other. I listened enviously to their merriment. I wondered which of them was getting teased, and whether it was the one with my own name. Beatrice, I know some of them by name as well as I know them by sight. The pretty, good-humoured looking girls who live in this road, the cheery young men. And yet, in all these years, I've never been allowed to have a neighbour or an acquaintance. I've never exchanged a single. "Good evening," said a pleasant man's voice into the midst of my reverie. Startled, I glanced up. The voice came over the palings between our garden and that of number 44. Through the green trellis that my aunt had set up over the palings, so that we should be more private, I beheld a gleam of white flannel-clad shoulders and of smooth fair hair. It was the young man who's lately come to live next door. I've always thought he looked rather nice, and rather as if he would like to say good morning or something whenever I've met him going by. I suppose I ought not to have noticed even that, and of course, according to my upbringing, I ought certainly not to have noticed him now. I ought to have fixed a silent, Medusa-like glare upon the trellis. I ought then to have taken my battered little green watering can to fill it for the 14th time at the scullery tap. Then I ought to have begun watering the Shirley poppies on the other side of the garden. But how often the way one's been brought up contradicts what one feels like doing. And alas, how very often the second factor wins the day. It won the evening that time. I said, "Good evening." And I thought that would be the end of it. But no. The frank and boyish voice, quite as nice a voice as my soldier brother Reggie's far away in India, took up quite quickly and eagerly. I say, isn't it rather a long job watering the garden that way? It was, of course, but we couldn't afford a hose. Why, they cost about 30 shillings. He said, "Do have the lend of our hose to do the rest of them, won't you?" And thereupon he stretched out a long, white-sleeved arm over the railings and put the end of the hose straight into my hand. "Oh, thank you, but I will not trouble you. Good evening." Of course, that would have been the thing to say, icily, before I walked off. Unfortunately, I only got as far as, "Oh, thank you," and then my fingers must have fumbled the tap on or something. Anyhow, a great spray of water immediately poured forth from out of the hose through the roses and the trellis, right onto the fair head and the face of the young man next door. "Oh," I cried, scarlet with embarrassment. "I beg your pardon. It's quite all right, thanks," he said. Most refreshing. Here I realized that I was still giving him a shower bath all the time. Then we both laughed heartily together. It was the first good laugh I'd had for months. And then I trained the hose off him at last and onto our border, while the young man watching me from over the palings said quickly, "I've been wanting to talk to you, do you know? I've been wanting to ask." Well, I suppose I shall never know now what he wanted to ask. For that was the moment when there broke upon the peaceful evening air the sound of a voice from the back window of our drawing-room, calling in outraged accents, "Beatrice! Beatrice!" Immediately all the laughter went out of me. Yes, Aunt Anastasia," I called back. In my agitation, I dropped the end of the hose onto the ground, where it began irrigating the turf and my 4 and 11-penny shoes at the same time. "Beatrice, come in here instantly," called my aunt, in a voice there was no gainsaying. So, leaving the hose where it lay, and without another glance at the trellis, I dashed through the French window into our drawing-room. A queer mixture of a room it is. So like us. So typical of our circumstances. A threadbare carpet and the cheapest bamboo easy chairs live cheek by jowl with a priceless Chippendale cabinet from Lovelace Court, holding a few pieces of china that represent the light of other days. Upon the faded cheap wallpaper, there hangs the pride of our home, the Gainsborough portrait of one chestnut-haired, slim-throated ancestress, Lady Anastasia Lovelace, in white muslin and a blue sash, painted on the terrace steps at Lovelace Court. This was the background to the figure of my Aunt Anastasia, who stood holding herself as stiff as a poker. She is very nearly as slim, even though she's 53, in her 3-year-old grey alpaca gown, with the little 8 3 farthings white collar fastened by her pearl brooch with Granny's hair in it. Her face told me what to expect: a heated flush, and no lips. One of Auntie's worst tempers. "Beatrice," she exclaimed in a low, agitated tone, "I am ashamed of you. I am ashamed of you." She could not have said it more fervently if I had been found forging cheques. After all my care, to see you hobnobbing like a housemaid with these people. Aunt Anastasia always mentions the people here as who should say, the worms in the flower beds, or the blight upon the rambler roses. I wasn't hobnobbing, Auntie, I defended myself. He only offered me the hose to the thinnest of excuses, put in my aunt, curling what was left visible of her lips. You need not have taken the hose. He put it right into my hand. Insufferable young bounder, exclaimed Aunt Anastasia, still more bitterly. I felt myself flushing hotly. Auntie, why do you always call everybody that who is not ourselves? I ventured. Honour bright, the young man didn't do it in a boundary way at all. I'm sure he only meant to be nice and neighbourly and— That will do, Beatrice. That will do, said my aunt majestically. I am extremely displeased with you. After all that I have said to you on the subject of having nothing to do with the class of person among which we are compelled to live, you choose to forget yourself over a garden wall and a hose, forsooth. For the future, kindly remember that you are my niece, impressively, that you are your poor father's child, more impressively, and that you are Lady Anastasia's great-granddaughter. This most impressively of all, with a stately gesture towards the Gainsborough portrait hanging over the most rickety of bamboo tables. Our circumstances may be straightened now. We may be banished to an odious little hovel in the suburbs among people whom we cannot possibly know, even if the walls are so thin that we can hear them cleaning their teeth next door. There is no disgrace in being poor, Beatrice. The disgrace lies in behaving as if you did not still belong to our family. Aunt Anastasia always pronounces these last 2 words as if they were written in capital letters, and as if she were uttering them in church. I am going to the library now to change my books, she concluded with much dignity. During my absence you will occupy yourself by making the salad for supper. Yes, Auntie, I said in the resigned tone that so often covers seething rebellion. Then a sudden thought struck me, and I suggested, hadn't I better return that hose? It is simply pouring itself out all over the lawn still. I will return the hose, said my aunt, in the tragic tones of Mrs. Siddons playing Lady Macbeth and saying, Give me the dagger. She stepped towards the back window. I didn't feel equal to seeing the encounter between Aunt Anastasia in her most icily formal mood and the young man with the nice voice of whom I caught white and gold glimpses hovering about on the other side of the green trellis. I knew she'd be rude to him, as only our families can be rude to those whom they consider bounders. He's nothing to me. I've never spoken to him before this evening. I oughtn't to mind what he thinks about those weird people who live at number 45. I oughtn't to wonder what it was he was just going to say to me. So I fled out of the bamboo and heirloom furnished drawing room, down the narrow little oil-clothed passage, and into the kitchen with its heartening smell of hot gooseberry tart and the cheerful society of Million, our little maid-of-all-work. It's the custom of our family to call the maid by her surname. At the same time, I couldn't help wondering what that young man had been going to say. Chapter 2. Two Girls in a Kitchen. Little Million, looking very cheery and trim in her black gown and her white apron, and the neat little cap perched upon her glossy black hair, smiled welcomingly upon me as I came into the kitchen. I like Million's nice smile and her cockney chatter about the soldiers' orphanage where she was brought up and trained for domestic service, and about her places before she came here. Aunt Anastasia considers that it is so demoralizing to gossip with the lower orders. But Million's is the only girl of my own age in London with whom I have the chance of gossiping. She likes me too. She considers that Miss Beatrice treats her as if she were a human being instead of a machine. She tossed the paper-covered celandine novelette that she had been reading into the drawer of the kitchen table among the lead spoons and the skewers and the cooking forks, and then she spread the table with a clean tea-cloth and brought out the colander with the lettuce and the cucumber and the cress that I was going to cut up into salad, doing everything as if she liked helping me. There now. What a mercy I left the kitchen window open. Now I haven't seen the new moon through the glass, she exclaimed, as she put all ready before me the hard-boiled egg, the mustard, sugar, pepper, salt, oil, and vinegar, for me to make the salad dressing. Miss Beatrice, look at it through the open window there, just to the right of that little pink cloud. Turn your money and you'll get a wish. I peeped out of the window and caught sight of that slender festoon of silver swung in the sky above the roses of the garden trellis. I've no money to tum. I smiled ruefully. Never have. Turn some of mine, miss, said Million. I've got 4 and 6 here that I'm going to put into the post office savings bank tomorrow. Million is extraordinarily thrifty. There you are. Wished your wish, Miss Beatrice. Oh, yes, I've wished it, I said. Always the same wish with me, you know, Million. Always a perfectly hopeless one. It's always, always that some millionaire may leave me a fortune one day and that I shall be very rich, rolling in money. Do you think so much of money then, Miss Beatrice? Said Million, bustling over the black and white checkered linoleum to the range and setting the lid onto her saucepan full of potatoes. Rich people aren't always happy. That's their own fault for not knowing how to spend the money. Ah, but I was reading a sweetly pretty tale all about that just now. Love or Money, that was the name of it, said Million, nodding at the kitchen table drawer in which she keeps her novelettes. And it said these very words, money doesn't buy everything. It would buy most of the things I want, I declared as I sliced away at my cucumber. The lovely country house where I'd have crowds of people, all kinds of paralyzingly interesting people to stay with me. The heavenly times in London, going everywhere and seeing everything. The motors. And, oh, Million. I heard my voice shake with yearning as I pronounced the magic name of what every woman thinks of when she thinks of having money. Oh, Million, the clothes I'd get. If I had decent clothes, I'd be decent looking. I know I should. Why, Miss Beatrice, I've always thought you was a very nice-looking young lady anyhow, said our little maid staunchly. And tonight you're really pretty. I was just passing the remark to myself when you came in. Look at yourself in my little glass. I looked at myself in the mirror from the sixpence halfpenny bazaar. I saw a small pink heart-shaped face with large brown eyes set wide apart and full of impatience and eagerness for life. I saw a quantity of bright chestnut hair, done rather anyhow. I saw a long, slender, white throat, just the throat of Lady Anastasia, sloping down into shoulders that are really rather shapely. Only how can anything on earth look shapely under the sort of blouse that Aunt Anastasia gets for me? Or the sort of serge skirt? Or the shoes? I glanced down at those 4 and 11-penny canvas abominations that were still sopping from the gardening hose, and I said with fervour, if I had money, I'd have 3 pairs of new shoes for every day in the week, and each pair should cost as much as all my clothes have cost this year. Auntie read her last book from the library, Rambles in Japan. She's always reading books of travel, our trip to Turkey, a cycle in Cathay, round the world in a motorboat, and so on. Poor dear, she would so adore travelling, and she'll never get the chance except in print. Once I begged her to sell the Gainsborough portrait of Lady Anastasia and take out the money in having a few really ripping tours. I thought she would have withered me with her look. She'll never do anything so desperately disrespectful to our family. She'll never do anything, in fact. Nothing will ever happen. Life will just go on, and we shall go on too, getting older and shabbier and more select and duller. They say that fortune knocks once in a lifetime at everyone's door. But I'm sure there'll never be a knock at the door of number 45 Labourham Grove, except, tot tot! Ah, the postman. Then Million's quick step into the hall, then nothing further. No letters for us. The letter must have been for our little maid. Perhaps from the young man who attended to the orphanage gas. Happy Million to have even an unwanted young man to write to her. Auntie read her last book from the library, Rambles in Japan. She's always reading books of travel, our trip to Turkey, a cycle in Cathay, round the world in a motorboat, and so on. Poor dear, she would so adore travelling, and she'll never get the chance except in print. Once I begged her to sell the Gainsborough portrait of Lady Anastasia and take out the money in having a few really ripping tours. I thought she would have withered me with her look. She'll never do anything so desperately disrespectful to our family. She'll never do anything, in fact. Nothing will ever happen. Life will just go on, and we shall go on too, getting older and shabbier and more select and duller. They say that fortune knocks once in a lifetime at everyone's door, but I'm sure there'll never be a knock at the door of number 45 Labourham Grove, except, tot tot! Ah, the postman! Then Million's quick step into the hall, then nothing further. No letters for us? The letter must have been for our little maid, perhaps from the young man who attended to the orphanage gas. Happy Million, to have even an unwanted young man to write to her. Chapter 3 A bolt from the blue. Oh, to think that fortune should have given its knock at the door of number 45 after all. To think that this is how it should have happened, of all the unexpected thunderbolts. And after that irresponsible talk about money and legacies and wishes this evening in the kitchen, and to think that destiny had even then shuffled the cards that she has just dealt. It was 10 minutes after the postman had been that we heard a flurried tap on the drawing-room door, and Million positively burst into the room. She was wide-eyed, scarlet with excitement. She held a letter out towards us with a gesture as if she were afraid it might explode in her hand. "What is this, Million?" demanded my aunt severely over the top of her rambles. "Oh, Miss Lovelace," gasped our little maid. "Oh, Miss Beatrice, I don't rightly know if I'm standing on my head or my heels. I don't know if I've got the right hang of this at all. Will you please read it for me?" I took the letter. I read it through without taking any of it in, as so often happens when something startling meets one's eyes. Million's little fluttered voice queried, "What do you make of that, miss?" "I don't know. Wait a minute. I must read it over again," I gasped in turn. "May I read it aloud?" Million, clutching her starched white apron, nodded. I read it aloud, this letter of destiny. It bore the address of a lawyer's office in Chancery Lane, and it began, "To Miss Nellie Million. Dear Madam, I am instructed to inform you that under the will of your late uncle, Mr. Samuel Million, of Chicago, USA, you have been appointed heiress to his fortune of $1 million. I shall be pleased to call upon you and to await your instructions if you will kindly acquaint me with your present address." "That was sent to the orphanage," whispered Million. "Or I should be very pleased to meet you if you would make it convenient to come and call upon me here at my offices at any time which may suit you. I am, madam, yours obediently, Josiah Chesterton." There was silence in our drawing-room. Million's little face turned with a positively scared expression from Aunt Anastasia to me. "Do you think it's true, miss? Have you ever heard of this Mr. Samuel Million before? Only that he was poor Dad's brother that quarrelled with him for enlisting. I heard he was in America, getting on well." "That class," murmured my Aunt Anastasia with concentrated resentment, "always gets on. That was horrid of her. I didn't know how to make it up to Million." I put out both hands and took her little roughened hands. "Million, I do congratulate you." "I believe it's true," I said heartily, finding my voice at last. "You'll have heaps of money now, everything you want. A millionaire's heiress, that's what you are." "Me, miss?" gasped the bewildered-looking Million. "Me, and not you, that wanted money. Me, an heiress. Oh, law, whatever next?" The next morning, the morning after that startling avalanche of news had been precipitated into the monotonous landscape of our daily lives, accompanied Million to the lawyer's office, where she was to hear further particulars of her unexpected, her breathtaking, her epic legacy. $1 million, £200,000, and all for the little grey-eyed, black-haired daughter of a sergeant in a line regiment, brought up in a soldier's orphanage to domestic service at £20 a year. To think of it! I could see my Aunt Anastasia thinking of it with bitterness, with envy. It was she who ought to have taken Million to that office in Chancery Lane. But she, the mistress of the house, excused herself by saying it was her morning for doing the silver. We left her in the kitchen surrounded by what I am irreverent enough to call the relics of our family's grandeur. The Queen Anne tea service, the early Georgian forks and spoons that have been womb and polished fragile and thin. Indeed, one teaspoon is broken. Aunt Anastasia took to her bed on the day of that accident. And the maid we had before Million scoured my grandfather's crime meddled so heartily that soon there would have been nothing left to see on it. Since then, my aunt has tended the relics with her own hands. We left her brooding darkly over the injustice that had brought fortune to a wretched little maid-of-all-work and poverty to our family. We hailed the big white motor bus at the top of the road by the subscription library and dashed up the steps to the front seat. "There! Bit of all right this, ain't it, Miss Beatrice?" gasped Million ecstatically. Stars of delight shone in each grey eye as she settled herself down on the tilted seat. I thought that this change of expression was because she had thought over her marvellous good fortune during the night, and because she had begun to realise a little what it would all mean to her. But I was quite wrong. Million, peering down over the side of the bus, exclaimed gleefully, "Look at 'em! Look at 'em all!" "Look at what?" "At all the girls down our road there," explained Million, with a wave of her tightly gloved hand. Almost every house in Laburnum Grove are made, in pink or lilac print, with pail and floorcloth, was giving the steps their matutinal wash. One was polishing the knocker, the bell handles, and the brass plate of the doctor's abode. And here am I, as large as life, a-riding on a bus, the first thing in the morning, enlarged Million, clenching her fists and sitting bolt upright. "At 9:30, if you please, first time I've ever done such a thing. I've often wondered what it was like, top of a bus on a fine summer's morning. I'll know now." "You won't ever have to know again," I laughed as I sat there beside her. "You won't be going in any more buses or trams or tubes." "Why ever not, miss?" asked Million, startled. "Why? Because you'll have your own car to go about in directly, of course," I explained. "Probably 2 or 3 cars." "Cars?" echoed Million, staring at me. "Why, of course. Don't you see there's a new life beginning for you now? A Rolls-Royce instead of a motor bus, and everything on the same scale. You'll have to think in sovereigns now, Million, where you've always thought in pennies. What? £3 for a threepenny ride to the bank, do you mean, miss?" cried Million with a little shriek. "Oh, my godfathers!" At that excited little squeal of hers, another passenger on the bus had turned to glance at her across the gangway. I met his eyes, the clear, blue, boyish eyes of the young man from next door. He looked away again immediately. There was an expression on his face that seemed meant to emphasize, to underline, the announcement that he had never seen me before. Apparently he had never set eyes on the small chestnut-haired girl, myself, in the shabby blue serge coat and skirt and the straw hat that had been white last summer, and that was now home-dyed rather unsuccessfully to something that called itself black. So evidently Aunt Anastasia had been rude to him about yesterday evening. Possibly she had forbidden him to speak to her niece and her dear brother's child, and Lady Anastasia's great-granddaughter ever again. This made my blood boil. Why must she make us look so ridiculous? Such futile snobs? Without any apparent excuse for keeping ourselves so aloof either. To put on select airs without any circumstances to carry them off with is like walking about in a motorcoat and goggles when you haven't got any motor, when you never will have any motor. It's Million who will have those. Anyhow, I felt I didn't want him to think I was as absurd as my aunt. I cleared my throat. I turned towards him. In quite a determined sort of voice I said, "Good morning." Hereupon the young man from next door raised his straw hat and said, "Good morning," in a polite but distant tone. He glanced at Million, then away again. In the blue eye nearest to me, I think I surprised a faraway twinkle. How awful. Possibly he was thinking, so the dragon of an aunt doesn't let the girl out now without a maid as a chaperone to protect her. Is she afraid that somebody may elope with her at 9:30 in the morning? I was sorry I'd spoken. I looked hard away from the young man all the rest of the ride to Chancery Lane. Here we got off. We walked halfway up the little busy narrow thoroughfare and in at a big, cool, cave-like entrance to some offices. Chesterton, Brown, Jones and Robinson, 3rd floor, I read from the notice board. No lift. Come along, Million. The stars had faded out of Million's eyes again. She looked scared. She clutched me by the arm. "Oh, Miss Beatrice, I do hate going up." "Why, you little silly, this isn't the dentist's." "I know. But oh, miss, if there is one thing I can't bear, it's being made game of," said Million pitifully halfway up the stairs. "This Mr. Chesterton, he won't half laugh." "Why should he laugh? At me, being supposed to have come in for all those dollars of me uncle's? Do I look like an heiress?" She didn't, bless her honest, self-conscious little heart. From her brown hat, wreathed with forget-me-nots, past the pin-on blue velvet tie, past the brown cloth costume, down to the quite new shoes that creaked a little, our Million looked the very type of what she was, a nice little servant girl taking a day off. But I laughed at her, encouraging her for all I was worth, until we reached the 3rd floor and the clerk's outer office of Messrs. Chesterton, Brown, Jones and Robinson. I knocked. Million drew a breath that made the pin-on ties surge up and down upon the breast of her Jap silk blouse. She was pulling herself together, I knew, taking her courage in both hands. The door was opened by a weedy-looking youth of about 18. "Good morning, Mr. Chesterton. Hope I'm not late," Million greeted him in a sudden, loud, aggressive voice that I had never heard from her before, the voice of nervousness risen to panic. "I've come about that money of mine from my uncle in name, Miss, please," said the weedy youth. "Nellie Mary Million, Miss Million," I amended. "We have an appointment with Mr. Chesterton." "Mr. Chesterton hasn't come yet," said the weedy youth. "Kindly take a seat in here." He went into the inner office. I sat down. Million, far too nervous to sit down, wandered about the waiting room. Chapter 4. The Lawyer's Dilemma. "Step this way, please," he said, with an imploring, "You go first, miss." From the heiress we stepped into the inner office. It was a big, handsomely carpeted room with leather chairs. Around the walls were shelves with black japanned deed boxes bearing white-lettered names. I saw little Million's eyes fly to these boxes. I know what she was wildly thinking, that one must be hers and must contain the $1 million of her new fortune. Beside the large cleared desk, there was standing a fatherly-looking old gentleman. He had white hair, a shrewd, humorous, clean-shaven face, and gold-rimmed glasses. He turned with a very pleasant smile to me. "Good morning, Miss Million," he said. "I am very glad to have this is Miss Million," I told him, putting my hand on her brown sleeve and giving her arm a little heartening pat. Million moistened her lips and drew another long breath as the fatherly old gentleman turned the eyes and their gold-rimmed glasses upon her small, diffident self. "Ah, ma'am, really? Of course. How do you do, Miss Million?" "Nicely, nicely, thanks," breathed Million huskily. "Won't you sit down, ladies?" "Yes. Now, Miss Million." And Mr. Chesterton began some sort of a congratulatory speech, while Million smiled in a frightened sort of way, breathing hard. She was full of surprises to me that morning, and, I gathered, to her lawyer also. "Thank you, I'm sure. Thank you, sir," she said. Then suddenly to me, "We didn't ought to keep this gentleman, did we, miss?" Then to Mr. Chesterton again. "Do you mind me asking, sir, if we hadn't better have a cab?" "A cab?" the lawyer repeated in a startled tone. "What for?" "To take away the money, sir," explained little Million gravely. "That money o' mine from me uncle, what I've called about." "Ah, to take away," began the lawyer. Then he suddenly laughed outright. I laughed, but together we caught sight of little Million's face, blushing and hurt, sensitive of ridicule. We stopped laughing at once, and then the old lawyer, looking and speaking as kindly as possible, began to explain matters to this ingenuous little heiress, as painstakingly as if he were making things clear to a child. The capital of $1 million, or of £200,000 of English money, is at present not here. It is where it was invested in the late Mr. Samuel Million's sausage and ham curing factory in Chicago, USA. Here Million's face fell. "Not here. Somehow, miss," turning to me, "I thought it never sounded as if it could be true. I thought there'd be some kind of a have, sort of. And, subject to your approval always, I should be inclined to allow that capital to remain where it is," continued the old lawyer in his polished accent. "There remains, of course, the income from the capital. This amounts, at present, to £10,000 a year in English money." "What is that?" breathed the new heiress. "What is that a quarter, sir? It seems more natural like that." £2,500, Miss Million." "Law," breathed the owner of this wealth. "And me that's been getting £5 a quarter, that other's mine?" "After a few necessary formalities, from which I anticipate no difficulties," said the old gentleman. Some discussion of these formalities followed. In the midst of it, I saw Million begin to fidget even more restlessly. I frowned at her. This drew the attention of the old gentleman upon me. Million was murmuring something about, "Very sorry. Got to get back soon, miss. Lunch to lay." Absurd Million. As if she would ever have to lay lunch again as long as she lived. Couldn't she realize the upheaval in her world? I gazed reproachfully at her. The lawyer said to me quite pleasantly, "May I ask if you are a relation of Miss Million?" Hereupon Miss Million shot at him a glance of outrage. "A relation? Her?" she cried. "The idea!" Little Million's sense of caste, fostered at the soldiers' orphanage, is nearly as strong as my Aunt Anastasia's. No matter if her secret daydream has always been to marry a gentleman, she was genuinely shocked that her old lawyer had not realized the relations between her little hard-working self and our family. So she announced with simple dignity, "This is Miss Lovelace, the young lady where I am in service." "Were in service," I corrected her. Million took me up sharply. "I haven't given notice, miss. I'm not leaving." "But, you absurd Million, of course you are," I said. "You can't go on living in Laburnum Grove now. You're a rich man's heiress. Will that stop me living where I want?" "I'm all alone in the world," faltered Million, suddenly looking small and forlorn as she sat there by the big desk. "You're the only real friend I got in the world, Miss Beatrice. I always liked you. You always talked to me as if you was no more a young lady than what I was." Do you think her voice shook? She seemed to have forgotten the presence of old Mr. Chesterton. "Do you think I'd have stopped so long with your Aunt Nasturtium if it hadn't been for not wanting to leave where you was? I'd be lost without you. I shouldn't know where to put myself, miss." "Oh, miss." There was a sob in her voice. "Don't say I got to go away from you. What am I to do with myself and all that money?" There was a perplexed silence. Million's lawyer glanced at me over his gold-rimmed glasses, and I glanced back above Million's forget-me-not wreathed hat. It is a problem. This little lonely thrifty creature brought up to such a different idea of life. What is to be done about her now? Chapter 5. Million leaves her place. Million has gone. She has left us. Our little cheerful and bonny and capable maid of all work, who has become a millionaire pork butcher's heiress. Never again will her trim, aproned figure busy itself about our small and shockingly inconvenient kitchen at number 45. Never again will she have to struggle with the vagaries of its range. Never again will she do out our drawing room with its disgraceful old carpet and its graceful old cabinet. Never again will she quail under the withering rebuke with which my Aunt Anastasia was wont to greet her if she returned half a minute late from her evening out. Never again will she entertain me with her stream of artless comments on life and love and her own ambition. "Oh, miss dear, I should like to marry a gentleman." Well, I suppose there's every probability now that this ambition may be gratified. Plenty of hard-up young men about, even of the Lovelace class, our class, who would be only too pleased to provide for themselves by marrying a million, in both senses of the word. Laburnum Grove, Putney, S.W., will know her no more, and I, Beatrice Lovelace, who was born in the same month of the same year as this other more favoured girl, I feel as if I'd lost my only friend. I also feel as if it were at least a couple of years since it all happened. Yet, it is only 3 days since Million and I went down to Chancery Lane together to interview the old lawyer person on the subject of her new riches. I shall never forget that interview. I shall never be able to forget the radiant little face of Million at the end of it all, when the kind old gentleman offered to advance her some of her own money down on the nail, and did advance her £5 in cash, 5 golden gleaming solid sovereigns. "My godfathers," breathed Million, as she tucked the coins into the palm of her brown thread glove. She'd never had so much money at once before in the whole course of her 23 years of life. "I've never had it, of course." And the tangible presence of those heavy coins in her hand seemed to bring it home to Million that she was rich, more than all the explanations of her old lawyer about investments and capital. I saw him look, half amusedly, half anxiously, at the little heiress's flushed face, and the gesture with which she clenched that fist full of gold. And it was then that he began to urge upon us that Miss Million must find some responsible older person or persons, some ladies with whom she might live while she made her plans respecting the rearrangement of her existence. To cut a long story short, it was he, the old lawyer, who suggested and arranged for Miss Million's next step. It appears that he has sisters of a reasonable age, I suppose that means about 138, who are on the committee of a hostelry for gentlewomen of independent means, somewhere in Kensington, sure to be a pussery of some sort. Gentlewomen living together generally relapse into spitefulness and feuds, and means can often be pronounced mean. Still, as Million's old lawyer said, the place would provide a haven pro tem. Our millionairess went off there this morning. She wouldn't take a taxi. "What's the use of wasting all that fare from here to Kensington, good gracious?" said Million. "There's no hurry about me getting there long before lunch after all, Miss Beatrice, and as for me things, they can come by Carter Paterson a bit later. I'll put the card up now if Miss Lovelace don't mind. There's only that tin trunk that I've had ever since the orphanage, and me straw basket with the strap round. Such luggage for an heiress." I couldn't help smiling at it as it waited in the kitchen entrance. And then the smile tuned to a lump in my throat as Million, in her hat and jacket, stumped down the wooden back stairs to say goodbye to me. "I said goodbye to your Aunt Nasta to Miss Lovelace before she went out, miss. My aunt is lunching at the hotel of one of her few remaining old friends who is passing through London." "Can't say I shall break my heart missing her, Miss Beatrice," announced the candid Million. "Why, at the last she shook Anne's hands as if I was all over black lead, and she was afraid of it coming off on her. But you've always been so different, as I say. You always seem to go on as if—" Million's funny little voice quivered. "As if God had made us both, don't Million," I said chokily. "I shall cry if you go on like this, and tears are so unlucky to christen a new venture with." "Is that what they say, miss?" rejoined the superstitious Million, winking back the fat, shiny drops that were gathering in her own grey eyes. "All right then, I won't. Keep smiling, eh? Always merry and bright, and cetera. Goodbye, miss. Oh, law. I wish you was coming along with me to this place, instead of me going off alone to face all these strange females. I wish I were, only I shall have to stay and keep the house until my aunt comes back." "Drat her! I mean, excuse me, Miss Beatrice. I wish you hadn't got to live with her. Thrown away on her you are. It's you that ought to be clearing out of this place, not just me. You ought to have some sort of a big bust-up and then bunk." "Where to, Million?" "Anywheres. Couldn't you come where I was?" "Anyways, miss. Will you drop me a line sometimes to say how you're keeping? And, miss, would you be offended if I said goodbye sort of properly? I know it's like my sauce, but oh, Million, dear, I cried. I threw both my arms round her sturdy little jacketed figure. We kissed as heartily as if we had been twin sisters instead of ex-mistress and ex-maid. Then Miss Million, the heiress, trotted off down Laburnum Grove towards the stopping place of the electric trams. And I, Beatrice Lovelace, the pauper, the come-down in the world, turned back into number 45, feeling as if what laughter there had been in my life had gone out of it forever. I suppose I'd better have lunch. Millions laid it ready for me for the last time. Then sit in the drawing room, finishing my darning and waiting for my aunt's return. If Million had been here, I could have spent the afternoon with her in the kitchen. Million gone. I feel lost without her. Nothing else will happen today. There's a ring at the bell. How unlike Aunt Anastasia to forget her key. I must go. Later. I went. But it was not Aunt Anastasia's herring slim figure that stood on the doorstep which Million insisted on whitening for the last time this morning. It was the tall, broad-shouldered, active and manly-looking figure of the young man from next door. Chapter 6. Another rumpus. Oh, I said, and felt myself blushing scarlet at the memory of all the absurd little incidents that were between me and this stranger. The incident of the garden hose, and of my giving him a shower bath with it the other evening, and how Aunt Anastasia had poured added cold water over him in a metaphorical manner of speaking. Then came the memory of how we had met the next morning on the top of the bus when I was chaperoning Million to her lawyer's, and of how the young man, chastened by my aunt's best iced manner the night before, wouldn't even have said good morning unless I had addressed him. It was all very absurd but confusing. He said in that pleasant voice of his, "Good afternoon. I wish to retem some property of yours." "Of mine?" I said, puzzled. I wondered whether a bit of lace of ours or something of that sort had blown out of the window of number 45 into the garden of number 44. But the young man, putting his hand into his jacket pocket, took out and held in the palm of his hand the property. It was an oval silver brooch, bearing in raised letters the name Nellie. The young man said, "I noticed it on the top of the bus, just after you got off the other morning. You must have dropped it." "Oh, thank you so much," I began, taking the brooch. "It isn't mine, as a matter of fact, but—" "Oh," he said pleasantly, "you are not Nellie?" Then he hadn't heard Aunt Anastasia calling me in that very rasping voice the other evening. "No," I said. "Nellie is our maid. At least she was our maid." "Oh, really?" he said, very interested. He has a delightful face. I don't wonder Million said he was just what she meant by the sort of young gentleman that she would like to marry. Then a thought struck me. Why not? Men have married their pretty cooks before now. Why shouldn't this nice young man be Million's fate? He certainly did seem interested in her. It would be a regular King Cophetua and the beggar maid romance. Only, owing to her riches, it would be Million's role to play Queen Cophetua to this young man who was too poor to go into the army. So, Feeling quite thrilled by the prospect of looking on at this love story, I said, "Would you like to send the brooch on to Miss Nellie Million yourself?" You see, I thought if he knew where to take it, he would probably go at once to the Hostelry for Cats of Independent Means and see Million, and find out about her being now a young lady of leisure and well. That might be the beginning of things. So I smiled at him and added in my most friendly voice, "Would you like me to give you the address?" It was at this moment, this precise moment, before he'd even had time to answer, that Aunt Anastasia, back from her visit to her friend, came up the tiny garden path behind him. Yes, and this was the scene that met her gaze. Her niece, her poor brother's child, Lady Anastasia's great-granddaughter, who had already been reproved for forgetting that she belonged to our family, standing at the front door of her abode to repeat the offence for which she had been taken to task, namely, talking to one of the impossible people who live about here. The way in which Aunt Anastasia stalked past the young man was more withering than the most annihilating glance she could have given him. To me, she said, in a voice that matched her look, "Beatrice, come into the house." I went into the drawing room. She followed me. Then the storm broke. Of all the many rows I've had since I came to live with Aunt Anastasia, this did, as Million would have said, take the bun. "Beatrice." She threw my name at me as if it had been a glove thrown in my face. "Beatrice, little cause as I have to think well of you, I did at least trust you." "You've no reason, Auntie," said I, holding myself as stiff as she did, which was pretty ramroddy. "You've no reason not to trust me." "What?" A bitter little laugh. "No sooner is my back turned, no sooner have I left you alone in the house, than you betray my confidence. How do I find you, after all that I said to you only the other evening on this same subject, standing there on the doorstep, just as if you'd been poor Million, poor little gutter-bred upstart, preparing to receive—" "I wasn't preparing to receive anybody," hotly from me. "No?" with icy satire from Aunt Anastasia. "You were not even going to ask the young man in? You stood there like a scullery maid indulging in a vulgar flirtation with a policeman." I wasn't. I heard you giving him an address where he could write to you, doubtless." "Write to me?" "It was nothing of the kind," I took up, ready to stamp with rage. It was Million's address I was going to give to that young man." "A likely story. Million, indeed. You don't believe me? How dare you not, Aunt Anastasia? Look, here's the proof." And I held out to her the oval silver brooch with the raised Nellie upon it. "Look, this is Million's brooch. She dropped it on the bus the other morning, and the young man from next door found it. And he came round to return it. Yes, as soon as he had made certain or had been assured that you would be alone," declared my Aunt Anastasia, with unyielding accusation in every angle of her. "To return Million's brooch. Oh, Beatrice, you must think me very unsophisticated." The thin lips curled. "This is an excuse even thinner than that about the garden hose the other evening. No doubt there have been others. How long have you been carrying on this underhand and odious flirtation with that unspeakable young cad. Auntie! I felt myself shaking all over with justifiable indignation. A flirtation? I, with that young man. Why, when I'd such honourable intentions of securing him as her gentleman lover for our newly made heiress, Million? I simply boiled over with righteous rage. I said, "You've no right to make such a suggestion. Beatrice, you forget to whom you are speaking." "I don't. But I'm 23 and I don't think you need go on treating me as if I were a schoolgirl refusing to listen to what I have to say. Allowing me no liberty, no friends." "Friends? Is that why you make your own in this hole and corner fashion?" "I shouldn't be to blame if I did," I declared hotly. "You don't realize what my life is here with you. It's all very well for you to live in the past, pondering over the dear departed glories of our family. But at my age, one doesn't care twopence for an illustrious past. What one wants is something to do, and to be and to enjoy in the present. I don't see why it should be enough for me to remember that even if I am poor, I am still Lady Anastasia's great-granddaughter. It isn't enough. It's the most futile sort of existence in the whole world, living up to an old pedigree when you haven't even got money enough to buy yourself the right kind of shoes. You sneer at Million for being what you call nouveau riche. It isn't half as humiliating and ridiculous as being what we are nouveau pauvre. Beatrice, I think you have gone mad to say such things." "Do you?" "I haven't. I've been thinking them inside me for months, years," I told her violently. The oval mirror on the opposite side of the wall from that Gainsborough portrait of Lady Anastasia showed a queer picture. The picture of a tall, angular, grey-haired and aristocratic-looking spinster in steel-grey alpaca, coldly facing a small, rumpled-looking girl, myself, with the tense pose, the bright flush, and the clenched hands of anger. And now I can't stand this sort of thing any longer. "What?" "Well, you taught me to pack and to mend lace, Auntie. And I can do hair, it's the only natural gift I've got," I said. "Perhaps I might get them to give me a chance in some small hairdressers to begin with." "You are talking nonsense, and you do not even mean what you say, child." "I mean every word of it, and I don't see why it should be nonsense," I persisted. "It isn't when these other girls talk of making a career for themselves somehow. They can get on. They are not ladies." "It's a deadly handicap being what our family calls a lady," said I. "I'm going to stop being one and to have something like a life of my own at last." "I forbid you," said Aunt Anastasia in her stoniest voice. "I forbid you to do anything that is unbefitting my niece, my brother's child, and Lady Anastasia's great-granddaughter." "Auntie, I am past 21, I said quite quietly. "No one can forbid my doing anything that is within the law. And I'm going to take the rest of my life into my own hands." Chapter 7. My Departure. I have been putting on all my outdoor things, for I feel desperate, and I must take advantage of this feeling. If I wait until tomorrow, when my rage and indignation and violent dissatisfaction with things as they are have died down, and I'm normal again, well, then I shall get nothing done. I shall think, perhaps life here with Aunt Anastasia at number 45 Laburnum Grove isn't so bad after all, even if I do never have any parties or young friends or pretty frocks or anything that other happier, less aristocratically connected girls look upon as a matter of course. Anyhow, there's nothing for it but to go on in the same humdrum fashion that I've been doing. Ah, no, I mustn't let myself go back to thinking like that again. The secret of success is to get something done while you're in the mood for it. In our hall with the unmended umbrella stand and the trophy of Afghan knives, I was stopped by Aunt Anastasia. "At least I insist upon knowing," she said, "where you are going now." I said, quite gently and amiably, "I am going to see Million." Million? The little object who was the servant here? Your taste in associates becomes more and more deplorable, Beatrice. You should not forget that even if she has happened to come into money, my aunt spoke the very word as who should say dross, and concluded, "She is scarcely a person of whom you can make a friend." Million has always been a very staunch little friend of mine ever since she came here, I said, not without heat. But I am going to this hostel of hers to ask her about something that has nothing to do with friendship. You have her address. You know that it's a deadly respectable place. I expect I shall stay the night there, Aunt Anastasia. Goodbye. And off I went. I was full of my new plan, a plan that seemed to have flashed full-blown into my brain while I was putting on my boots. It had made me almost breathless with excitement and anticipation by the time I had rung the bell of the massive maroon-painted door of the Kensington address, and had said to the bored-looking manservant who opened it, "May I see Miss Million, please?" Such a plan it was as I had to unfold to her. There was something odd and unfamiliar about the appearance of Million when she ran in to greet me in her new setting. The very early Victorian, plushy, marble mantelpieced, glass-cased drawing room of the ladies' hostelry in Kensington. What was the unfamiliar note? She wore her Sunday blouse of white Jap silk, her brown cloth skirt that dipped a little at the back. But what was it that made her look so strange? Ah, I knew. It was so funny to see our late maid-of-all-work in the house without a cap on. This incongruous thought dashed through my mind as quickly as Million herself dashed over the crimson carpet towards me. Miss Beatrice. Law! Doesn't it seem ages since I seen you, and yet it's only this very moment since I left your aunt's. Well, this is a treat, she cried, holding out both of her little work-roughened hands. It is nice, seeing someone you know, after the lot of old cats and sketches and freaks and frosty faces that live in this establishment. And the new heiress gave herself a little shake as she glanced round the spacious, gloomy apartment that we had for the moment to ourselves. Evidently, Million found the Kensington haven recommended by her lawyer no change for the better from our Putney villa. Under the circumstances, and because of my plan, I felt rather glad of this. I said, "Don't you like the place then, Million?" "What are the people like?" "Only one word to describe 'em, Miss Beatrice. Chronic. Fair give you their hump. None of 'em married except one, who's a colonel's widow, and thinks she's everybody, and all of 'em about 80 in the shade. And spiteful and nosy," enlarged Million, as we sat down together on one of the massive red plush-covered sofas, under a large steel engraving of Lord Byron and the Maid of Athens. She went on. "They wanted to know all about me, of course. watching me every bite I put into my mouth at table, and me so nervous that no wonder I helped myself to peas into me glass of water. Looking down their noses at me and mumbling to each other about me, not what I call very polite manners, and chance the ducks. Here the drawing-room door opened to admit one of the ladies, I suppose, of whom Million had been complaining. She wore a grey woolly shoulder shawl and myrtle green hair. I suppose something had gone wrong with the brown hair restorer. And this lady gave one piercing glance at me and another at Million as she sidled towards a writing table at the further end of the drawing room and sat down with her back towards us. I'm sorry to say that Million twisted her small face into a perfectly horrible grimace and stuck out her tongue at the back. Then Million, lowered her voice as she chattered on about her new surroundings. Cry myself to sleep every night, I should, if I was to try to stay on here, she said. Couldn't feel happy here, not if it was ever so. Oh, I'd rather go back to the orphanage. Something of me own age there, anyhow. Don't care if it is very tony and high class and recommended. It's not my style. I don't know where I'm going after, but Miss Beatrice, I'm going to get out of this. I can't stay in a place that makes me feel as if I was in prison, so I'm going to hop it. That's just how I felt, Million. That's what I made up my mind to do, I told her. The new heiress gazed at me with all her bright grey eyes. What? You, Miss Beatrice? You don't mean that I'm not going on living at number 45 Laburnum Grove? What? Million raised her voice incautiously, and the myrtle-green-haired lady glanced around. Miss Nosy Parker, muttered Million, and then, straight? You mean you've had a bust-up with your Aunt Nasturtium? Rather, I nodded. About that young gentleman I lay? Said Million. Him from next door. How did you guess it was that? It was, I admitted. He came to return this brooch of yours that you dropped on the bus. Here it is, and my aunt chose to... Oh, I know the way Miss Lovelace would choose, said Million with gusto. So you left her, Miss Beatrice. So you done a feat at last, like I always been saying you did ought to do. You done it. Cheers. And now what are you thinking to do? Coming to me, are you? I smiled into the little affectionate rosy face that I was so accustomed to seeing under a white frilly cap with a black bow. I said, yes, Million. I'm coming to you if you'll have me. Ow! That's the style, miss. If I come, you won't have to call me miss anymore, I said firmly. That'll be part of it. Part of what? Asked Million, bewildered. Part of the arrangement I want to make with you, I said. And then, looking up, I beheld curiosity written in every line of the back of that woman at the writing table. I said, Million, I can't talk to you here. Get your hat on and come out. We'll discuss this in the park. And in the park, sitting side by side on two green wooden chairs, I unfolded to Million my suddenly conceived plan. Now listen, I began. You're a rich girl, a young woman with a big fortune of her own. Oh, miss, I don't seem to realize it one bit. Yet, you'll have to realize it. You'll have to begin and adapt yourself to it all, quite soon. And the sooner you begin, the sooner you'll feel at home in it all. I don't feel as if I'd got a home now, said Million, with the forlorn look coming over her face. I don't feel as if I should ever make anything out of it, of this here being an heiress, I mean. Million, you'll have to make something of it. Other people do, people who haven't been brought up to riches. It may not come natural to them at first, but they learn. They learn to live as if they'd always been accustomed to beautiful clothes and to having houses and cars and all that sort of thing galore. Million, these are the things you've got to acquire now you're rich, I said quite threateningly. Even your dear old lawyer knew that this Kensington place was only pro tem. You'll have to have an establishment to settle where you'll live and what you want to do with yourself. I don't want to do nothing, Miss Beatrice, said little Million helplessly. Don't talk nonsense. You know you told me yourself quite lately, I reminded her, that you had one great wish. Million's troubled little face lifted for a moment into a smile, but she shook her head. In that awful crimsony straw hat that she will wear for best. You do remember that wish, I said. You told me that you would so like to marry a gentleman. Well, now here you will have every chance of meeting and marrying one. Oh, miss, but I'm really not the kind of girl that... So you'll have to set to and make yourself into the kind of girl that the kind of gentleman you'd like would be wild to marry. You'll have to... Well, to begin with, I said impressively, you'll have to get a very good maid. Do you mean a girl to do the work about the house, miss? No, I don't. You'll have a whole staff of people to do that for you, I explained patiently. I mean a personal maid, a lady's maid, a person to do your hair and to Marcel wave and to manicure and to massage you, a person to take care of your beautiful clothes. Haven't got any beautiful clothes, miss? You will have. Your maid will take care of that, I assured her. She'll go with you to all the best shops and tell you what to buy. She'll see that you choose the right colours, I said with a baleful glance at the crimson floppy hat, disfiguring Million's little dark head. She'll tell you how your things are to be made. She'll take care that you look like any other young lady with a good deal of money to spend, and some taste to spend it with. You don't want to look odd, Million, do you? Or to make ridiculous mistakes when you go about to places where you'd meet. Oh, miss, said Million, blenching. You know that if there is one thing I can't stick, it's having to think people may be making game of me. Well, the good maid would save you from that. I'd be afraid of her then, protested Million. I said, no, you wouldn't. You've never been afraid of me. Ah, said Million, but that's different. You aren't a lady's maid, I said firmly, a thing that made Million's jaw drop and her eyes nearly pop out of her head. I said, I want to be a lady's maid. I want to come to you as your maid, Miss Million's maid. Miss Beatrice, you're laughing. I'm perfectly serious, I said. Here I am, I've left home, and I want to earn my own living. This is the only way I can do it. I can pack, I can mend, I can do hair. I have got the sense of clothes, that is... I should have, I amended, glancing down at my own perfectly awful serge skirt. If I had the chance of associating with anything worthy of the name of clothes, and I know enough about people to help you in other ways. Million, I should be well worth the £50 or £60 a year you'd pay me as wages. Me pay you wages? Little Million almost shrieked. Do you mean it, Miss Beatrice? I do. You mean for you, a young lady that's belonged to the highest gentry, with titles and what-not, to come and work as lady's maid to me, what's been maid of all work at £22 a year in your aunt's house? Why not? But miss, it's so skew whiff. Too topsy-turvy somehow, I mean, protested Million, the soldier's orphan, in tones of outrage. I said, life's topsy-turvy. One class goes up in the world. That's your millionaire uncle and you, my dear, while another goes down. That's me and my aunts and uncles who used to have Lovelace Court. Won't you even give me a helping hand? Million, won't you let me take this situation that would be such a good way out of things for both of us? Aren't you going to engage me as your maid, Miss Millionaire? And I waited really anxiously for her decision.